Welcome back, everybody, into Bill's Chat. I am Josh McCarty. With me tonight, as always, is Luca. Luca, for the fifth year in a row, our Buffalo Bills are AFC East champions. I thought this was a rebuilding year.
Yeah, no, I mean that's what we were being told all off season. You lose. What did they say? What was it? It was five captains
Mhm.
from last year's team left, and how are they going to be able to recoup when you have Diggs and Gabe Davis walk out of the door and all of these things? And can Josh Allen figure it out and stuff? But that little tidbit that was also out there, it's like, well, if Josh Allen can still show that he can do it this season, even without all of that, he should clearly be the MVP. And I think as we're sitting here on December 1st, for at least 8 more minutes where I'm sitting, I think it's safe to say that 5 times AFC East champion now, Buffalo Bills being led by Josh Allen. Yeah, I think Josh Allen sitting in the MVP driver's seat. And it's good to have playoffs locked up. Out of all the teams in the NFL, we are the first ones, I think. I don't think the Chiefs locked up anything yet.
They
Did
locked
they?
up a playoff spot. They didn't lock
Damn
up the
it.
West.
All right. Well, we were the first one to lock up a division,
Mhm.
and that is beautiful because obviously the job's not done and they're going to keep moving along. But to have that already in your back pocket and that nice safety blanket of home playoff game, and you have the division good and wrapped up, and there's no threat kind of behind you in your own kind of facility. It's a great, great feeling to be this early in the season. Something I know you love. The first time a team's locked it up this early since the 2009 Colts. I thought that was perfect because Josh loves to pull it back to Colts comparisons when he's talking about these Buffalo Bills. So it just gave me a little giggle when I saw that.
There are some other Colts comparisons we may get into tonight with these Bills, but I think the larger story here is, there was a contingent of people. I'll put myself on that list. I thought this team was going to regress. I just looked at this team before the season started and I was like, where are they going to get their offense from at the skill positions? And I respected Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox, but I wasn't sure what it would look like with Khalil Shakir going from wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, all the way up to wide receiver 1 when the season started. I didn't know what to expect from Curtis Samuel. I didn't know what we could count on from Keon Coleman as a rookie. Obviously, I had no idea they're going to trade for Amari Cooper. I didn't know what the run game would look like without Mitch Morse. Turns out this is the best offensive line that the Bills have had in a long time. And that was on display tonight, Luca, when the Bills go out in the snow, in the wind, in bad conditions, and I will say in a lot of ways, conditions that a lot of us have kind of feared since this team in 2020 became kind of an aerial show of like, let's not find weather to slow this team down. Can the Bills go out and punch with a team that's capable of punching you in the mouth in these conditions? And here you had the Niners, and they're down some guys, some big guys, Trent Williams, Bosa, Purdy's playing with an injured arm, shoulder. McCaffrey goes out early, but the Niners come to town, and their big ticket is physicality and toughness. And the Bills go out and rush for 220 yards. They get 6.6 yards per play. They win the game 35-10, Luca. When this game went final, you and I were already in the backstage room talking about what we're going to do with this recording. But when this game was final, when the Mitch Trubisky was kneeling it out to get the Bills to 10-2, what was going through your mind?
Those boys are soft from Cali. No, it was great. It was just overall so happy that this team actually did something that at least myself, that it's documented in the preseason, felt that they could still do since 17 was under center for this team. And that Sean McDermott, for any criticism that even myself may have had for him in the past, he's still a quality coach. And that overall in the AFC East, they are the cream of the crop. And I feel like what it I will say I felt something for the first time as someone that supports the Bills where I looked at and I was like, this truly must be what it felt like to be a Patriots fan for a while, where it was just like, okay, moving on. How do we get the 1 seed now? Like, cool. Love the division title. That's a great piece of hardware. 5 times. Josh Allen gets to point at the hat, after the game, all that fun stuff. But it's like, all right, how do we move on from here? How do we get the 1 seed? What do we have to pay attention to for that? How is that obtainable, if at all? Things of that nature. And but once the kneel downs were happening, it was just happy to see that success in winning the division once more, especially in a year where even someone like yourself just couldn't see that path for them and see it to be done in such such quick fashion and such just an incredible way where they are the first team to lock up their division, both because of how great they've been, but then also how poor the division has been on top of it. It's just a great feeling overall to see the kneel downs just confirm that no one will be taking that AFC East crown from these Buffalo Bills for yet another season.
You mentioned how do we get the 1 seed? The answer is pretty clear. The Chiefs have to lose one, and I'm looking at their last 5 games, and I would say, especially based on the fact that we saw the Raiders take them down to the wire, we saw the Broncos take them down to the wire, we saw the Panthers take them down to the wire. There's some losable games here. Chargers next week. After that, they go to Cleveland, which is not going to be easy, particularly with the state of their offensive line. Then they have Texans at the Steelers, at the Broncos to close out the season. That Broncos team could potentially have everything to play for when it comes to a wild card spot. I feel like, Luka, if the Bills win out, they're going to get the 1 seed. I just think the Chiefs have been playing with fire a little bit too much, and we're going to get into this Bills game here in a little bit, but I feel like the Chiefs been playing with fire a little bit too much. Again, they got kind of lucky with a terrible bounce by the Raiders. It was the right call, but a terrible bounce by the Raiders at the end of the game with the fumble. And I don't know. At the end of this show, I'd like to get like your opinion on ranking the teams in the AFC of like fear factor worst to first. But I don't look at these 5 games and at all think that it's just a foregone conclusion that the Chiefs are going to just win out.
It does feel like a slip up is in there when
Mhm.
you look at that. I mean, division games are always tough. And the fact that they have multiple ones against better division opponents in there, where they are just coming off of a Black Friday game, like you said, where it took a kind of a Raiders slip up to give them the win. One where I will say, in all respect to Kansas City, if there's any to be given to them, they're not even happy with what's going on. You see Travis Kelce walking off the field and not even like, congratulating or whatever you want to say it with anyone else. He's not happy with what's going on. Whatever you want to put to that, so be it. But overall, you see that Chargers game coming up next on Sunday night next week, and the Chargers are playing a winning football right now. They had a slot that 1:00 game at Atlanta. That smelt like a Chargers gonna Charger. They're gonna lose that. West Coast team, 1:00 East Coast game. That's a classic kind of trap spot for a team like that. Something that the Cardinals kind of experience in their own right, where it just doesn't work out for them and they slip up when they really shouldn't, because the Chargers were the better team on the field, but they proved it and they won. And it wasn't the prettiest of things, but they won. And now they are a type of team too that does have a little bit of confidence when it comes to playing the Chiefs. We've seen Justin Herbert walk into Arrowhead before and win that game. That it definitely could happen. And then this Denver team, we'll see on Monday night. If you're listening to this Monday night, great. Or Monday, if you're listening to this later in the week, you already know what happened on Monday night between Denver and Cleveland. But Denver's humming right now, and Bo Nix is playing really well, where he is potentially your offensive rookie of the year. There are losses to be had for the Chiefs, but also on that note, and I'll kick it back over, but the Bills win out could be the 1 seed, but at the same time, it's not like they exactly have a easy road to get to win out, because there is one that kind of peeks its ugly little head around the corner there. Not to overlook the Rams at all, but there is that little game there after them where we're on the road that I would say is my least confident game of the season to date on how I feel the Bills will come out from that one.
Well, the best news for Bills players who had to play in 3 hours of wind and snow tonight is the next 2 games are indoors.
Yeah.
They're on the road next week against the Rams. I would expect that to be 60% Bills fans. And then they're going to be in Detroit, and that one will not be 60% Bills fans because these Lions fans are into it. But the Bills will travel well to that game, and that should be the game of the week as far as the league is concerned. And that's going to have a lot of implications on the 1 and 2 seeds in both conferences. But Luka, let's get back to the Niners game tonight. Josh Allen has done a lot of things as Bills quarterback that we have not seen before. He's hurdled defenders. He's caught touchdown passes. He's ran and thrown for touchdown passes in the same game. He's won multiple playoff games. He had the perfect game against Belichick, but he defied all math today, Luka, where he scored 2 touchdowns on 1 play. Have you ever seen anything like that in your life?
No, I mean, no, it's schoolyard stuff, right? That's what that is. That is I mean, you heard it on the broadcast, and it always gets brought up in these snow games in general, where it's backyard football. You know, you have, I loved, I will say, even on this topic, when they even highlighted, I think it was Juwan Jennings in a route where it was just like come to a skirt by just tiptoeing, and then just try to beat your guy through. That's the kind of football it was. So then in classic fashion, a play happens later on that we're talking about here, where it feels like something that, you know, me and the guys back in the day would have done just to have some laughs and try to pull off something that was truly fun to do. And that is just a on the fly hook and ladder that starts with Josh Allen throwing the ball and finishes with him running in it as well. He broke fantasy. You know, he created the 11-point play without even getting a reception. Congrats to him on that one. That is very, very impressive. It was fun. It's really cool. I love the fact that, you know, you even had the presence of mind, or maybe you found it out because it randomly resurfaced itself, where in a joking tweet from July, you talked about, can Josh Allen throw and catch to, you know, a touchdown and things like that. And here we are. Statistically, he did in fact do just that. Might not be exactly how you envision it or like the gift depicted it, but overall, by the box score itself, just like the old guys at a baseball game writing it in the notebook, Josh, that is exactly how it goes down officially. And that is what it is. He threw the ball. It then ended up in his hands and he ran it in, which made it his receiving touchdown. Just a, it was a fun play. It's one that even got the commentators just giggling and laughing, and just, it's one of those ones, Josh, I would put it this way. I'm talking about how it's like backyard football. It's one of those plays when it happens, you even see Mahomes' reaction. That's one of those plays where you're like, this is why football's awesome. It's fun. This is just a cool ass play. And it's another one that can kind of go in the Josh Allen highlight reel now for potentially, not to jinx anything, but knock on wood, for maybe that one piece of hardware he might get for a regular season award after this year based on what he's doing so far.
That would be amazing. There's a couple of big awards out there that I think are very realistic to hope that Josh Allen can get this year. One that's eluded this fan base for our entirety. And one thing that would help that is what Luka mentioned before, the 1 seed. And the 1 seed gives you home field advantage, but Luka, it also gives you the only bye in your conference. And why is that important? Well, you get to rest, but also Sean McDermott as Bills head coach is now 8-0 after a bye, coming off of a bye, and that includes tonight's victory over the 49ers. Just an all-around dominant performance. I never felt like the Niners were in this game. I did not flinch one bit when I saw them running down the field kind of at will in that first drive and then get stopped in the red zone. I mean, you'd have to almost forget every game the Bills have played this year if you're going to freak out about gashes of runs against you early in the game when the Bills are feeling out what you're going to do against them. Then they tighten up in the red zone. And, you know, the Bills' first offensive drive is nothing pretty. It's a 3 and out and they're punting. And again, no reason to panic. Now, hang out on Twitter for 5 minutes. People weren't living by that, but this team figured it out. One thought that hit my mind tonight, Luka, is these Bills, we know they can run the ball in a way that we haven't seen a Bills team traditionally run since Josh Allen has been here. And tonight we saw it, 220 yards on the ground. James Cook had 107 yards on 14 carries. Ray Davis averaged 63 or added 63 yards on 11 carries. Ty Johnson, 28 yards on 5 carries. They had 5.6 yards per carry for Johnson, 5.7 for Ray Davis, 7.6 for James Cook, and Curtis Samuel adds a 7-yard carry. We know they can run the ball. That's the ultimate thing you have to be able to do in this bad weather. But then what the Bills also have is a freakazoid of a quarterback that apparently is weatherproof, windproof, and oh, by the way, if nobody's open it, he'll just do what he did for what my money is, the best linebacker in football, Fred Warner, and outrun him to the pylon and score a touchdown. What an absolute pain in the ass it must be to try to defend this team in weather or even non-weather when this Bills team is humming, when they're making smart plays, when Josh Allen's taking his checkdowns. It just feels like they are almost an unstoppable force. And there's a matter of it's not if, it's when with this offense.
I think the fun part of this team overall is that both sides of the ball have elevated themselves in a way where panic never needs to ensue as a fan. And what I mean by that is going to the offense first, of course, you don't think that Allen has that turnover in his bag anymore. That is not on the back of your mind anymore. There's no longer the damn it, we're getting this Josh this go around. It just doesn't feel like it exists, because if there was a time where that could easily even be excusable, Josh, it would be in a bad weather game such as this one, where you have Brock Purdy just having one slip out of his hand like everyone else did during their turkey bowls just a few days ago in the backyard or in the field or wherever they were playing. It's one of those things where Josh Allen can still dominate no matter what the playing surface is. You said it perfectly when it comes to he can even outrun the best linebacker. I mean, he's PFF's number one linebacker. I am with you on that. He is probably my number one linebacker in this league, and he outran them. And I don't want to hear anything where it's like, well, it's bad weather, let's see him on speed turf or whatever. It's like field conditions are the same for both. He outran him. He got him. That's what it is. Fred Warner couldn't touch him. Now, Fred Warner also is apparently playing with a broken ankle, I believe it's being said, or something of that nature. So be it. He might not be at 100%, but it is what it is. And Josh Allen can make those plays even against the healthiest of linebackers as well. But with the defensive side, Josh, and what I want to kind of give the flowers of, I share the same sentiments of you. When Christian McCaffrey was gashing this defense early on, I don't even want to call it a bend, don't break, even though that's the classic saying for it. It truly is just put us in our comfort zone. And the comfort zone is once you no longer have to, they no longer need to have to respect the downfield play, right? You no longer have to have your safeties so far off where you are kind of at risk of getting gashed up a little bit. Once the end zone's back to them, they're not going to concede that territory one bit. And it's not going to be easy. Like you have to then actually earn your stripes with this defense. And I feel like even back in the days when we had, top 5, top 7, top 10 defenses with the Tremaine Edmonds and, the safety duo that we've had for a long time, that was not necessarily something I felt was always the case. I feel like once, teams would get in the red zone, depending on who they were, it was still very much for the taking for them. This defense, I've never been more confident in a McDermott defense when in the red zone, the defensive red zone, than this defense this season. I just genuinely believe that that's when they get real good, from front all the way through to the safeties. They are just dominant in the red zone, and they are not going to give an inch unless you absolutely do something special to take it. And I think tonight was very evident in just another case of that, where the Niners were doing a very good job starting drives off, driving down into a scoring area. But then once it got real, that was gone. And the Bills defense just shut it all down. They didn't let it happen, whether they started a first down with a negative play and or just made it happen in the 3 downs that they needed to make it only be a field goal attempt. It was just an absolute beautiful thing. And I think this defense deserves the flowers when it comes to that as well, just as much as the offense. It's just when you watch this team on either side of the ball, and even special teams for that matter, to be quite honest, all 3 phases, there is just such a confidence and ease of mind you can have with them that they are just the best they've been in the McDermott era all the way across the board.
There's a video going around of Scott Van Pelt interviewing Sean McDermott after the game. Josh Allen runs up behind McDermott. McDermott and Josh Allen both fall to their backs and start doing snow angels. And it is incredible. And McDermott gets this reputation as a guy that, he's a
Business.
stiff or no personality, but it is, if you're a Bills fan of a certain age, like you never thought this would be your team. And this team loves McDermott. And then at the end, McDermott's wearing like a standard Bills hat. He tries to put his hat back on. Allen takes it off and puts the championship hat on his head. It's just really cool. But I'm with you. The defense is feeding off of the offense. The defense, I think, understands that, hey, this offense, as they're currently built, can get us as far as we want to go. Can we match them? And they got a big boost tonight, Luka. They got Matt Milano back. And I know in the box score, maybe it was a fairly forgettable game for Matt Milano. He had 3 tackles. It looked like he was a little bit slow out there, and that's to be expected. 1, everybody was slow. It was the snow. 2, he hasn't played football, live football. Last year he missed the entire end of the season. So He hasn't played live football since the London game with Jacksonville last year. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of rust to knock off. But man, the fact that the Bills now have this runway of games up before the playoffs where they have 5 games left to really ramp up Milano, I do think it gives them a very good chance to get him to a point where he can be an impact player for them. Can he be an all-pro version of himself? I don't know if that guy even still exists, but I don't know if they need him to be that. You said off the air that, you know, despite Matt Milano struggling, one of the best things the Bills have going for them is they still have Terrell Bernard and Dorian Williams. But this is a perfect scenario now for Milano to ramp up for the playoffs. What do you think is realistic now to expect out of Matt Milano, assuming he doesn't get hurt over these next 5 games by the time the playoffs roll around?
Assuming Matt Milano doesn't have any sort of regression, injury wise, and so on and so forth, the ceiling and the expectation for me with Matt Milano is you just have an extremely high end package linebacker. And what I mean by that is, I mean, Matt Milano still has the all pro brain and he understands the game at a very, very high level. He might be hindered a little bit based on the injuries that he's kind of had to overcome for the past, what is that? Year and 2 months,
Right.
whatever it is, of not having ball where he just needs to get his body up to speed and also recover. But like you mentioned, I did, and I do feel this way. And I don't think I'm alone in feeling this, but you have Dorian Williams and Terrell Bernard to kind of be your baseline 2 linebackers when you're out there in nickel. But in obvious passing downs or whatever it is, something that Dorian Williams himself struggles at, what better thing to have sitting there on the bench and ready to go than another leader, another guy who understands the pass game from a linebacker's perspective and knows exactly what he needs to do in this defense than Matt effing Milano. Like, that is such an incredible asset to have that, as you're saying, you can ramp up, get ready for the postseason, and next thing you know, you're not rotating AJ Klein in so you can hopefully better defend the run and stuff like that. And you're just going to scrape by with this guy off the street. No, the individual you're going to turn to when you need someone in pass coverage now, because Dorian Williams might not be the best guy for it at this moment in his career, is, this guy who is first team all pro, Matt Milano. Like, that is an incredible, incredible asset to have, that if you can get it ramped up and he can just continue to remain healthy and recover and get better week in, week out, that with that and Terrell Bernard just continuing to do his thing, yeah, that's a special situation to be in, honestly, where I don't know where the hole or problem is with that 3 linebacker situation. And even if you have to go heavy, Josh, it's like, oh, darn, you're going to have to put Dorian Williams in a strong linebacker position instead of
Right.
weak or whatever. It's like, oh, darn, now we have to have Milano on there full time. Like, not exactly a quote unquote problem to have. Like, that's a wonderful situation to have now at your disposal.
It is funny that you look at the couple years in a row, the Bills in the 3rd round take an undersized linebacker in Terrell Bernard and Dorian Williams, and both those picks were met with a lot of scrutiny. And it's amazing to think of where this team would be without those 2 players at this point in time. Speaking of the Bills defense, a lot was made this offseason about losing the 2 all-pro safeties, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. If you've been paying attention to the Dolphins, and I don't take any pleasure in this, I take pleasure in the Dolphins' struggles, but not Jordan Poyer's struggles. He's not having a good year. You know who is having a really good year, Luka, is Taylor Rapp. And he was Johnny on the spot again tonight, where it's 21-3. The Bills are in control, but the game is not over. The second half, the Niners are just starting to run it down the Bills' throat. And you're thinking, maybe they did find something here. And then it's a handoff to Kyle Juszczyk, and Taylor Rapp goes over, punches it out, and then Christian Benford picks it up, runs it back to midfield. And that was pretty much game, set, match as far as my mind goes. Taylor Rapp has had a nose for big plays. He's had multiple turnovers. He's had a couple punch outs. He has been found money for this Bills team. When they re-signed him this offseason to a multi-year deal, I thought, man, they're gambling a little bit. I mean, the money is not heavy at all. It's almost like high-end backup money. But I never thought that Taylor Rapp was somebody that was a good idea as a starting safety for this team. And I will just have to remember what I've been saying. And, it sounds weird to say it, but it's like Sean McDermott and, for years, Leslie Frazier and now Bobby Babich, They have earned my trust when it comes to defensive backs. They saw something in Taron Johnson. They saw something in Tre'Davious White when he was kind of like a borderline first round pick. They saw something in Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde when they brought him in free agency. People knew who Micah Hyde was, not so much Jordan Poyer. Saw something in Christian Benford. Yeah, they missed on Kyer Elam, sure. But they identified Rasul Douglas. And now they have Taylor Rapp coming in, taking over for two stalwarts on this defense. You have people like me, like, who the hell am I saying? He's slow. He's kind of a slug. He's more of a box safety. And he's one of their leaders. He's the leader in that defensive backs room. And he has an absolute nose for the football. And game in and game out, Luka, he's been one of the most important players on the field. And I know that because on several times where he's gotten injured, I think to myself, one, you don't want to see somebody get hurt, but also, man, we can't afford to lose that guy. And that's your heart telling you exactly how you feel. And that's how I feel about Taylor Rapp at this point.
I think the best part about what happened today in the Niners game was that live, I don't think I really recognized who had forced the fumble or what had happened when Juszczyk fumbled, because of course in these conditions anything could have happened. But then seeing Benford scoop it up and kind of start running got me all excited personally, just because I do love me some Christian Benford action. But I will say, as soon as it had kind of done, I was like, I had almost waited to see number 9 be near the play, because that's what I expect from Taylor Rapp really at this point. I will say he seems to have he's using the Guardian cap also in a fascinating way, Josh. He shed it for the Kansas City game, and then all of a sudden he's got it right back on for this Niners game, and it's almost like he's utilizing it, one, as just a nice winter hat over the helmet, but then two, maybe because he knew he'd have to get a little bit more scrappy in a game like this. Props to him if he's just going to use it to an advantage. Maybe more people need to just do that now. But it didn't surprise me one bit when you see the play and it's just Taylor Rapp getting a fist on the ball, making a play happen, and overall just he does. He has the nose for the ball, like you said. It's beautiful. And it's definitely something where I am shocked. I am shocked with myself still to this day that we are sitting here with Taylor Rapp and DeMar Hamlin as our safety pair, and not only am I not concerned about it, but I feel pretty good about it. And preseason me had the one hot take of DeMar Hamlin wouldn't make this roster, and two, that even though I was concerned about the safety room and it would be a rotation and so on and so forth, that we would still be able to get by, with whoever's back there, no matter what. And not only do I think we wouldn't necessarily be able to get by as well as we are if it was as bad as I thought it was, but I think they are a massive key to that. And Taylor Rapp is definitely a massive, massive piece to this defense's success. And kind of what I talked about before, where once the back of the end zone is to them and they're able to kind of sit in and figure out what they want to do, I think that's also where Taylor Rapp excels. And case in point, example number probably 50 of the season is that punch out on Juszczyk. Just someone that is normally very secure with the ball and knows what his job is. They only give him a handful of carries, every 4 weeks. And Taylor Rapp just made sure there was none of that, and they weren't going to be able to get a score in that moment. Where would the Niners have been able to come back and win the game from that point if they got that touchdown? I really highly doubt it, but that would have at least put it in a position where I think at that point, Josh, it was a 21-3 game still, maybe a 28-3 game. I can't exactly remember, but overall, I remember thinking, as you did as well, once that punch out happens, once we scoop and run it to midfield, I don't even care that it was all the way to midfield. Could have been to the 15 for all that matter. That was, good game, set match. This thing's over. And I think we saw it even with the Niners. Once that had happened, they kind of started checking it in and just, not really caring too much more. And those Cali boys are real soft when it comes to a little bit of adversity. So I think you said that before we started recording, and I couldn't agree more. So, but yeah, Taylor Rapp, props to you, man. That's yet another game this season where you are showing your true worth, and you're probably gonna get another contract real soon to stay here, because it feels like you are just yet another on the long line, as you have said, of DBs that thrive in the McDermott tree. It is definitely to a point where I'm with you, where it's just blind faith and trust can be had with McDermott and Babich and whatever. So even if they wanted to go in at Emmanuel Forbes, the likes of someone like him, you know what? It's like, so be it. You got Lewis
Yeah.
Seen sitting on the practice squad. It's like, cool. You see something with this guy, I'll ride it with you. If you see anything they've failed elsewhere, you think you can do something, I'm all for it.
Well, speaking of defensive backs, one of the bigger stories, one notable story before this game started was the inactives list. And, there's a couple of names on there we can get into. Keon Coleman was inactive. Thigh Doctor says that he heard Adam Schefter say on ESPN that it's a bone bruise he's dealing with. So Thigh Doctor says he should be good to go by next week. If he was close to playing, the Bills just probably erred on the side of caution. He did not wear a cast this week in practice. Amari Cooper's still wearing a cast in practice, so that tells you it's not the same injury. So Keon Coleman back sooner rather than later. Dalton Kincaid missed another game. I wouldn't be surprised, Luka, if they hold Kincaid out even another week. This is a guy that's going to be very important for what they're doing. And quite honestly, it's not a massive drop off right now with Dawson Knox out there. So you can afford to take your time with Kincaid. But the other name that's notable in the inactives is Kyer Elam. Kyer Elam has been inactive now 2 games in a row as a healthy scratch. And the conversation coming out of camp was Kyer Elam had the best camp of his life, the best preseason of his life. And he's like the new Dane Jackson on this team. He's a starting level player that just happens to be behind 2 very good corners. Well, I think the Bills are probably telling us with their actions that they may not see it that way. And I know it could be as simple as, well, Kyer Elam doesn't offer as much on special teams as Jamarcus Ingram. You can only dress 46 guys on game day. That's the story of it. But Dane Jackson was always active on game day. And I think if they thought that Kyer Elam was really a starting level player that just happened to be behind 2 Pro Bowl level players, they'd find a use for him on game day. This is a team that had to play a chunk of games without Taron Johnson. He couldn't get on the field. They found unique ways to put Jamarcus Ingram at linebacker, and Kyer Elam still couldn't get on the field. I think it's been a fun thing to think about, like, hey, maybe he's a late bloomer, and maybe he still is. But I think at least reading into what the Bills have done the last couple of weeks, making him inactive, it's at least worth wondering if they view Jamarcus Ingram as equal to Kyer Elam with the advantage of he offers more on special teams, or maybe they like Jamarcus Ingram better, but when Taron Johnson and Matt Milano were out, he had to cross train at multiple different positions, and now he can focus on that boundary cornerback, and maybe they just simply like him better than Kyer Elam. But long story short, Luka, I think the Bills are kind of letting us know that maybe the August excitement over Elam was a little premature.
I do still kind of believe the theory of thought where it comes to he just doesn't offer the versatility that all these other DBs do on game day. And I think that's really truly where it is. I think if there was any question with boundary corner, he becomes active on game days. But overall, it is, I do also believe, telling that, like you're saying, they're more comfortable on game days if one guy goes down on the game, that you're going to get something out of a Jamarcus Ingram, and you don't need to have this, as Kyer Elam likes to call himself, a Bugatti in a crap garage, just ready to go to fill in as that boundary corner replacement. It is telling that I think there's something missing, at least from what McDermott and maybe even Bean and personnel individuals think they have, and then what Kyer Elam maybe even thinks he has. And there's just this disconnect in belief, even maybe potentially going all the way back to preseason, where it's like, yes, he might have had the best camp he had, but they still believe that for this roster, for their use and for what they can bring to the table, your Jamarcus Ingrams, your Cam Lewis's, those are more valuable assets to have than a Kyer Elam. And at this point in time, if you're not willing to activate this guy for whatever reason, because he can't provide you anything other than boundary corner play, there is the conversation to be had where it's just cut your losses at this point. Try to see if you find anything for it, which you probably aren't going to find a whole heck of a lot, depending on how also the Rasul Douglas, like you said, there is that fun thought of, is he truly just a late bloomer? We're not going to be extending Rasul. This is when we're going to just try to lean on him and see what we have. is the player even going to appreciate that when it comes around to next season? Stuff like that. There's a lot of questions on it, but what I will say is, as at least from a fan and just looking at it from a business perspective, this isn't necessarily the worst thing to have going on. Like, it is the reality of the situation with Kyer Elam. And I just think it's a combination of a lot of things that ultimately come down to just simply, he does not offer the versatility you need on game day that you do have elsewhere on the roster. And then on top of all things, you clearly do not see the skill separation between him and then those guys who do offer the versatility where that trumps it. I think that's what it comes down to. If Jamarcus Ingram is that close to you, regardless if he's better or worse, if he's that close to you as Kyer Elam, that you are not seen as valuable as Jamarcus Ingram, that is a problem if you are Kyer Elam.
Yeah, it seems like at the very least, he's a lot closer to Jamarcus Ingram than he is to Rasul Douglas or Christian Binford. Notable that he is in his third year of his rookie deal, and as a former first-round pick, that means the Bills have to decide this offseason if they're going to pick up his fifth-year option or not. That would almost certainly seem to be a slam dunk no, because that is guaranteed for everything but injury. Or no, it's guaranteed for injury, and that's a massive deal. It's almost the same amount as a transition tag in year 5. It's what Greg Rousseau is going to be going into next year. So you really would like to see the Bills find a way to get that extension done before he ends up playing on the 5th-year option. And then, Kyer Elam, he also could get extended this offseason. I would not hold your breath on that one either. So it feels like, barring a situation where he's able to get on the field and really show out the rest of this year, we're going to kind of go into next year with the same opinion we have on Kyer Elam this year, which is good athlete. Not sure if he's ready for prime time yet. All right, Luka, let's do game balls and game check because I have some big picture questions for you before we get out of here. A little bit of an abbreviated show tonight because we're recording this. It's already Monday morning on the East Coast, and Luka still has to do post-show prep or post-show production.
Yeah.
There it is. Game balls and game checks. Luka, who gets your game ball for the Bills 35-10 victory over the San Francisco 49ers?
So there's obviously a few options, I think, on this front that ultimately I truly believe can get a game ball. I mean, Josh Allen always feels like he shows up, even though statistically, even though he did something that is very rare, it's a unicorn where he threw and caught a touchdown all in the same play. I don't want to go that direction, though, because I think there's other ways to go. And ultimately, I'm honestly just for the reason of the big picture of the game, because I think this is where, if I were to, if we were to be in an NFL locker room, and I think where the game ball would go in that situation, I think this would be a Sean McDermott game ball. And the reason I say that is because he is the head coach of a team that just won their 5th straight division championship. And they did it off of a dominant win. And on top of it all, they've done it where, from preseason perspectives, it was seen with a lot of adversity, more so than what they've had in the 4 previous years that they've won the division. So honestly, because of that and the big picture view of it all from what came from this game, I will give it to Sean McDermott winning his 2nd division after a snow game, but overall 5th division straight, being the AFC East. So Sean McDermott, you get my game ball, because this year has been, in my opinion, your most impressive season as a head coach of the Buffalo Bills, still with games to go.
I agree with that. I think he should be squarely in the coach of the year conversation. It's hard to imagine him winning it over some of the guys out there. Like O'Connell is squeezing so much out of Sam Darnold right now. Mike Tomlin gets a lot of credit for, the switch from Justin Fields when they had a winning record to Russell Wilson, and now they are kind of a machine. And but I think Sean McDermott's getting lost in the conversation a little bit. I'm going to go with James Cook. And look, he had 14 carries, 107 yards, 1 touchdown, had another 13-yard catch through the air. But this is a guy that was drafted as a scat back, basically, out of Georgia. We loved what he could do in the passing game, wasn't as in love with him in the running game. And this, to me, was the perfect script to find out, okay, James Cook, are you truly an RB1 in this league? A physical team coming to town, snow on the ground. They all know you're going to run it. He averages 7.6 yards per carry. On the season now, James Cook has 596 rushing yards and 10 rushing touchdowns already. Holy cow, Luke. I didn't know he had 10 rushing touchdowns already. Averaging 4.4 yards per carry this season. Just been an absolute bell cow for this team. And he's been one of the best players on this offense consistently. And James Cook was a star tonight. Wanted to give it to Josh Allen, not only because of the fact that he had 3 touchdowns, one where he threw it and caught on the same play, but also congratulations to Josh Allen. He got engaged this week. The Bills announced that Josh Allen and Haley Steinfeld are engaged, and also Alec Anderson got engaged this week. Not quite as big of a story. Don't think it was to a famous celebrity, but I can't say for sure. All right, Luka, with the good, I guess there's got to be some bad. Who gets your game check for this game?
That's a tough one. That honestly is a super tough one. I mean, realistically, if I had to give a game check award, I can't even do the classic cop out for punting, with Sam Martin, because Sam Martin actually had a very good day, all things considered, with the weather and whatnot. You could do Tyler Bass, but he did go 5 for 5 with extra points, and the only field goal miss he had, I feel like the weather was even getting worse at that point, and the game really didn't matter. So I even told my wife as we were watching the game early on, I was like, if there's one game, even as we were nervous for the first extra point at that moment in time, that I will give Tyler Bass a pass for a miss, it would be today, because let's be honest, that is far less than ideal weather conditions to be kicking field goals or extra points in. I'm honestly going to go, man, this is tough. Jeez. I genuinely am struggling with this one. I'm going to probably go with just the interior defensive line as a whole. And the only reason I'm going to do that is because that was the only place where I felt the Bills were struggling mightily. And they were getting bossed around even by inexperienced left tackle and left guard for the Niners. And they were able to easily work their way to the second level in the run game, which is why you were seeing so much success from Christian McCaffrey before he went out, and then Jordan Mason and so on and so forth, that I just think they had a tough night. It's hard overall to really be too critical, because once again, especially in the trenches, as funny as it was with the Niners interior defensive linemen, footing was not exactly the best, as we are all aware. But yeah, if I have to give a game check, I would just say the interior defensive line as a whole, because I just think they had, from all parties considered, they had probably the worst night of them all.
Yeah, I'm gonna echo that. We try not to do the same thing. I was gonna go specifically Daquan Jones on mine, but Ed Oliver also, and I'm with you. If this was just like a one-off bad night, you could excuse it because of the conditions. But this is a trend with these two. Neither one of them have been playing at a high level, I think, this year. I think Daquan Jones really hasn't even really had a good game yet this year. It's concerning when you go back and look at it. You could make the argument that Elianku actually is their best one technique on the roster, and he's on the practice squad. They're going to need more out of Daquan Jones when they get into these big money games in January, or they're going to need to find an alternative there, whether it's Austin Johnson or somebody else that can really help out at the nose. Because right now, you even saw tonight, Chris Collinsworth called it out on the broadcast. There were times where the Niners would start double teaming the Bills defensive tackle and then just immediately go to the second level, knowing that the one-on-one block by a backup, as Luka mentioned, was going to be just fine. All right, Luka, I talked about the playoffs a little bit. Before we get out of here, I want you to let me know, let's just talk through ranking first. We'll just say to 7th right now, or 6th, because the Bills are going to be one of them. The scary teams in the AFC. And if your list gets cut off at 3, it gets cut off at 3. But the fear factor, the teams that you would least like to see the Bills play against, how do they rank in the AFC? And starting off, what's the one team that if I told you no matter what happens, they're going to get matched up with this team in January in the AFC, that you'd say, shoot, I'd love to find a way to avoid them?
The natural answer is Kansas City, but I don't even know if it's that high. So let me just put it this way. I struggled to find any team, and I don't mean this in any arrogant way, but I've struggled to find any team that I wouldn't fancy the Bills on their day being able to take. And what I mean by that is I don't even need them to play perfect. It's just, if Josh Allen's doing his thing, if the defense is doing their thing, if the offense as a whole is doing their thing, I think they're the best team in the AFC right now. I genuinely believe that. Again, not even at full throttle, all cylinders go, perfect, but just doing their thing. Josh Allen being the guy that he is, and just, doesn't have to be Superman, but can be when you need him to. Like if that happens, I'm not overly scared. But if I have to rank the rest, I would still put Kansas City 1 just because it is Reed and Mahomes.
And that
From
game most likely is in Arrowhead. That
Right. Yeah. I think that factors into this entire thing too, because anyone else is coming to Buffalo, but as it stands right now, it's in Arrowhead. So that is there. I would probably, I'd probably, man, this is going to be so painful to say. I'd probably put Pittsburgh 2. And that's just because that defense, man, it doesn't matter who they have on the edge. You have as long as you have TJ Watt on one of them. If you have TJ Watt and Nick Herbig, someone that I was quoted saying I kind of liked, even though he didn't fit the Bills. If they have anyone else, and then Cameron Hayward still in the middle, and just they are flying around defensively. Patrick Queen's been great for them as an interior linebacker. I think that defense can win games for them. But then on top of it all, I mean, there's a reason Steelers fans are sussy for Russie, because this looks like vintage. Russell Wilson might be the first player of all time that was borderline should be Hall of Famer, fell out of Hall of Fame status, and somehow is working himself right back into the conversation where it's like, I can see him going back to the Hall of Fame now. Like, I could see it. I mean, he just dropped 400 on a bad Bengals defense, but he's doing it in such an incredible way that you're like, okay, this is vintage Russell Wilson. This is why he was, an elite quarterback for all those years when he was in Seattle, so on and so forth. So I would probably put Pittsburgh 2 just over Baltimore 3, but I will say Kansas City, a little bit of a gap, Pittsburgh, tiny gap, Baltimore. And then after that point, I don't care. Like I would say the Bills are a 7-point favorite over anyone else. So at that point in time, I just don't care.
So I'll flip the 3. I have KC 1 for all the reasons you pointed out. I mean, the pedigree of Mahomes and Reed, the game would be in Arrowhead. I do think that these teams always play close games. That game would make me nervous. I'm with you. As it stands right now, there's not an opponent in the AFC that I will go into this game thinking the Bills are going to lose this game. It's more about like, that's going to be a tough one. And it's the playoffs. They're going to be tough, but if I could find a way to avoid the Chiefs, great. Ravens are still 2. I cannot forget what I saw on Sunday Night Football. I worry about what the Ravens like to do versus how the Bills are kind of stubborn defensively. They like to stay in their too high shell and nickel defense, and they don't mind having light boxes. That kind of plays into the Ravens' hands. But, Sean McDermott's not just going to roll out the same game plan he had before. To me, that's where the first gap is. I hear you on Pittsburgh. I guess my apprehension there is they're such a big play offense where it's run, deep shot to George Pickens, run, deep shot. And the Bills just take away the deep shot. You have to go. That's why the Dolphins just have been so bad against the Bills recently. You have to go paper cuts against the Bills to move down the field consistently. And I don't know if I've seen enough from Pittsburgh, but as far as complete teams go, you're right. When you were saying the thing about Russell Wilson, I was thinking in my mind, who's the only, is there anybody else that even has that track? I thought about Randall Cunningham way back in the day when he wound up in Minnesota with Randy Moss and kind of had a career resurgence. I thought about your guy in Arizona, Kurt Warner, had a Hall of Fame start to his career with the Rams and then became like a backup with the Giants, a backup with the Cardinals. And then when Matt Leinart fizzled out, he got inserted in there and it was like, now he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league again. But yeah, this is kind of cool to see. You know who my 4th team is? All due respect to the Chargers, I just think that the Chargers matchup with the Bills is anything you can do, we can do better. If the Bills lose to the Chargers, I think it'll just because they had a bad day. I'm not fearing the Texans. I know the Texans beat them earlier in the year. Just bring it on, Texans. I'd love to get our hands on them. A team I find myself rooting against every single week in the AFC, and I will 100% admit it's out of zero interest in seeing them come to Buffalo, the Cincinnati Bengals. And I think I got my wish today. I think that they're out of the playoff race. But that offense can score on anybody. I think they can score on anybody. And if you happen to catch Josh Allen on an off day, I think there's a chance the Bengals come in here and put 30 on the Bills. And that's just something I'd rather not deal with. So I don't think we're going to have to. I think the Bengals are about as dead can be right now. But they are still high up on my fear factor list. And I would have honestly said Miami. just because they can run the ball well. I have no interest in seeing a division opponent for a third time in the playoffs. I think that's another team that's pretty much dead at this point. But the Bengals and Miami would be two teams that I'd rather play the Broncos, the Chargers, not the Ravens so much, but the Texans. I'd rather play those teams than see the Dolphins come to town with absolutely nothing to lose and a familiarity with the Bills, or the Bengals come to town like with, hey, everybody pronounce us dead. Now we're in the playoffs. Like, I'm good.
Yeah.
Let's leave those teams out.
Yeah, I will say I didn't even bring up the Bengals because I do believe they're dead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, watching the 1 o'clock slate, my main attention was on Cardinals, Vikings. Real cool thing that it was the local game here for whatever reason. I always, even though it doesn't matter in my household because I can watch any game at any time, I always find it fun when it's the local game because then I can put it on the antenna and I know I'm like the most up to date on it. There's just something special about it,
Makes
Josh.
it easier to live bet.
Yeah, does make it easier to live bet. But the other game that was local, of course, was Pittsburgh Cincy. And, one of my buddies in the living room, of course, said, are we rooting for anyone specifically in this one? First thing I said to him was, I truly believe now we're at the only point of Bills fandom where it's how do we get the 1 seed? We're not concerned about matchups, but yes, I would like to see Cincy dead in the water as well. I as much as I talked about Pittsburgh's defense, which does scare the living shit out of me, and then Pittsburgh as a whole, like I do agree with what you said on their offense. It does feel like to move the chains significantly, they do need that big play, which they seem to get pretty regularly. They do a good job. Arthur Smith's doing a fantastic job, but it's like I would fear the Bengals if they're in there with that kind of we're here. We somehow magically got here, and now we're gonna fuck your day up. Like we're gonna cause some chaos here because they truly feel at that point they have nothing to lose. They have the leading sack getter in the league, even though their defense is still crap. And they have Joe Burrow, who, if it wasn't for his record, would probably be the runaway MVP right now because he is balling out with that offense. That yeah, they can't get it done in the end. They're getting outscored by Russell Wilson and the Steelers in their own house. And it's just, you can't be doing those things. You can't be strip sack fumbled for a touchdown in the big moment kind of deal. It's bad moment after bad moment. And thank God it feels like they're dead in the water at this point in time. Although that 7 spot, Josh, I wish it was the NFC where it's like, no, you would have to be sitting here right now with 7 wins rather than in the AFC where it's like, you can still be flirting around with 500 right now and still make it. So because of that, it's like they are only at 8 losses, I want to say. So you can still be 9-8. And it feels like the AFC 7 seed could be one of those ones where weirdly enough, a 10-7 or a 9-8 team, God forbid, makes it in that spot. So we'll see.
Root for Denver tomorrow night. That's what I'm telling you.
Yes.
Tonight, root for Denver. You want them. Look, I respect Denver's defense. I respect the fact that they came in here and won a game last year. But if Bo Nix beats me in the playoffs, then it wasn't my year.
Yeah. And I will say this, though, too, Josh. If we get like Steelers over Kansas City in a few weeks, and let's live in this hypothetical world before we wrap up. Let's say the Bills are the 1 seed and the Steelers are the 2 seed with the Chiefs in the 3 seed because of how the shakedown goes, where Christmas Day, Steelers beat the Chiefs in Pittsburgh and the Bills then leapfrogged everything. And that's how it worked. And then the Broncos were in the 7 seed. What sounds better than the Broncos paying Russell Wilson $35 million to kick their ass in a playoff game? Because that sounds fun to me.
That'd be hilarious.
I would love to see it. I would love to see everything. It's all about storylines when it comes to the wild card to me, Josh. I love storylines. And Denver going to Pittsburgh with Russell Wilson getting paid only $1 million by the team he plays for and $35 million by the team he's playing against in a playoff game. Oh, and Sean Payton clearly hates him. And it's like, oh, please just give the people what they want. If somehow we get it where it's the Steelers, I don't care how it happens. Give me Denver at Pittsburgh wild card, because one of them's going to lose, but I'm not fearful of either. And then 2, it's just a great game to watch for storyline purposes.
Speaking of storyline, Jets fans, I got something for you. There's a very good possibility you could get yourself a Seattle Seahawks versus Minnesota wildcard game. Why do you care? Sam Darnold versus Geno Smith, baby. I mean, they've both beaten the Jets this year.
I don't know if it was a real stat, Josh, but I saw a tweet from at least a respectable source that said the Jets have found a way to be the first team in NFL history to lose to 2 quarterbacks in the same season they drafted. I don't know if that's real because that feels like one of those stats. It's like how hard do you have to dig to find that stat? But
Yeah.
but it does also feel like a classic Jet stat. So I'm gonna let that live in a space where it is true, even regardless if it's not. And yeah, it is perfect though. They have lost to now both Geno Smith and Sam Darnold in the same season as they sit there with the flaming dumpster fire that is the Rodgers experiment.
That is wild. And you have to think, like, generally speaking, if you draft a quarterback and he becomes good enough to become a starter, he stays with your team. So it's hard to think of a scenario where you let these quarterbacks go. But you look at the NFC, all the good teams are quarterbacked by somebody who wasn't drafted by them. Not Hurts, not Daniel, but then you have Geno Smith, you have boy, my point's losing steam here. You have Baker Mayfield, you have Jared Goff, you have Sam Darnold.
There's
So
enough where it's notable.
there's enough where it makes a little bit of sense. But I guess
Yeah.
you have Russell Wilson and the other, whatever.
Kyler Murray.
Aaron Rodgers in the AFC. So, not that Aaron Rodgers is on a good team, but it's going to be fascinating to watch. This is the first time, even since the Bills were really good, where I kind of just almost had that Nick Wright approach, like whoever shows up. I mean, I prefer not to be Baltimore, but and prefer not to go to Arrowhead, but preference versus fear. I mean, I prefer not to have to do it, but if you told me right now the Bills had to beat Baltimore in round 2 and then win an Arrowhead in round 3, I'd say, okay, I'm going to pick them to win both those games.
Yeah.
So bring it on. And maybe after today, maybe the Lions aren't the shoe in the NFC. There's a team in Philadelphia that's kind of figured it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Although they still scare the living shit out of me for when the Bills have to go to Detroit. That's for sure.
Well, before the Bills go to Detroit, they are in Los Angeles next week. Early confidence factor in that game, Luka.
9.5.
Yeah.
I think the Rams are trash. I just, they are not good. I think they have a lot of, like, the Rams are still exactly what we thought they were 2 years ago, where it's like, oh, they have a fun bunch of pieces around there. It's like, you got your Cooper Kupp and your Puka Nakua. You got Kyron Williams, who all of a sudden didn't have a touch for like the entire first quarter plus, like the weirdest thing of all time. Matt Stafford still does it. And then Jared Verse, who they drafted, he's been pretty good. They have these guys. Jared Verse is a defensive end, if you're not aware. They have these guys that are like, yeah, these are fun. But then you look at the team as a whole, and they were struggling to move the ball, and they were in a tie game with the Saints. And it's just like, wait a second. They're in a tie game with the Saints. This team that I'm confident knowing now it's not apples to apples, and it's like one team's different from the other. There's matchups, things like that. I'm confident this Bills team would probably put up 48 on the Saints and probably allow maybe 10. So now you're talking about the Rams, who I think still aren't exactly a dominant threat on either trench. So the key to beating the Bills is you need to dominate where it's dirty. You need to dominate in the trenches. Primarily, you need to have a dominant offensive line. And I don't think the Rams come anywhere close to that. And for that reason, it's like, so you're going to get us by splash plays and motion and the McVay way. It's like, you might be able to get chunk plays off of us here and there, but overall, I mean, that we're going to be able to impose our will eventually offensively, and then it's going to force you into a one-dimensional game where then we're going to capitalize, and it'll snowball from there. So yeah, confidence is a 9.5 right now.
You know what the Rams are? The Rams are the Bengals, like almost like a poor man's Bengals. They have a quarterback we all know who's probably going to the Hall of Fame. They have 2 very, very good receivers, and that's about it. They have a running back that you play in fantasy who's pretty good, and the defense can't stop a nosebleed. They have a good edge, Jared Verse. I mean, right up there with Trey Hendrickson, guys like that. Now he's not up there with those guys, but like the same kind of scheme.
Yeah.
Jared Verse maybe gets there someday, but this is a defense, and unlike the Bengals, where you could kind of hope for weather or whatever to kind of throw a variable in there, the game's going to be indoors. Good luck stopping Josh Allen with that group. I think you'll need a really off performance by the Bills. It has happened before in the past, but yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think that the Bills should be just fine getting to 11-2, and then the showdown in Motown the week after that going to be a lot of fun. I'm strangely confident about that game. I don't know why I'm saying strangely. The Bills are a 10-2 football team. I feel like we were right to be confident against anybody. But Luka, you and I'll be back next week, win or lose, with a post-game show on the Rams. And any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No. I'm glad that this was a stress-free Sunday night game. And I'm also going to say this. I'm glad that primetime games are now in the rear view mirror until playoff season. I am
Yeah.
ready to go back to regular Sunday scheduled football. I'm
Mhm.
done with this. I'm not being an old man yelling at cloud here, but overall, it's like sometimes I don't need to be staying up late to watch my Bills football or at least any team I'm invested in. Like, for instance, when I saw that ASU was playing the Big 12 championship, shout out ASU, at noon on Saturday, I was very happy that it wasn't an 8 o'clock game. I was like, okay, it's noon. Now, it's weird that it's in Dallas being played at noon Eastern for a mountain time zone team and Iowa State, who's central. But I'm not going to get into that whole discussion. Overall, I like the normal slots. I like the 1 o'clocks. I like the 4:30s. Those are fun slots. You enjoy football, and then you can casually fade into the night and get into the next day. It's going to be great to go back to that.
Yeah, we got 2 4:25 games coming up. I prefer 1 o'clock just because you're ready for football as soon as it starts. Get my team out there, get the win or the loss, and then you have the rest of the day just to kind of like marinate on it. And you have a crew over at your house, so you're watching football. For me, I'm a dad, so like I'm watching the late games if the Bills play, but I'm also kind of starting to think, what are we gonna do for dinner? What do I have to do for work the next day?
Yeah.
Then you kind of like take a break for an hour, and then you just chill with the Sunday night game, and then you record with Luca. But the Bills, I'm not trying to. I know there was a time period where it was like we got one token Thursday night game, and that's because the league threw us a bone, and it felt like a huge deal. And now the Bills are on Sunday Night Football, and you're like, oh yeah, whatever. We get like 5 of these a year, but I'm ready for it to be over too. All right, Luca. Well, speaking of things being over, that's going to do it for our show. We'll be back next week with a Rams post game show. For Luca, I am Josh. The Bills are AFC East champions. We will see you next week on Bills Chat.